We've been talking all week long about this wonky, bad, gross Phoenix Suns bench and how to fix it. But on today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll talk about the starters. Yeah, that's right. The group who is the reason that the Phoenix Suns are where they are. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons, and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. A big thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Wednesday. That's right. It is Wednesday, and again, a big thanks for listening. If you're finding us on YouTube or Spotify or Apple or anywhere, make sure to go ahead and hit follow or subscribe. Make sure you do not miss a show. We are here every single day, and you should be as well. The only way you really need to support the show is just by listening and watching. So again, thank you. We have a lot to get into today, starting with the starters. And we all have laughed at the discrepancy between the bench and the starting lineup that we saw in the preseason loss to Adelaide. And I'm not going to make any excuses about that. The bench was not good. But I want to flip that today, because as much as you can make of the bench being bad, there's also the very obvious point that should not be forgotten, that the starters are very, very good. Okay, so, and it's not just the Adelaide game. I think it's something that's worth reinforcing here today, because I think Suns fans are a little bit down in general. I think the problems with Deandre Ayton, the departure of Jay Crowder, and the loss, I mean, they didn't lose, but the inability to get Kevin Durant, and then even going back to Game 7 and the way that ended, I think it's been very difficult to focus on the positives about this Suns team for a while now, and I don't blame anybody. I've focused on plenty of the negatives as well, but I think when you really get to the bottom of it, Jay Crowder aside, Cam Johnson aside, because I do think it's a little bit of a question mark, not so much what Cam is or if he'll be good or if he'll even be successful with this unit, because we've seen that, but the chemistry, the continuity, that's not the core group that this team has been built around. Whereas I think it's pretty obvious the Paul, Booker, Bridges, Ayton nucleus, it works. And I think, again, that's such an incredible starting point for a Suns team, for any team to be rolling the ball out from. Like, if you go into games knowing you have those 4 guys and they are going to blow the lid off the game, or they have the possibility of doing that, you're going to feel pretty good. So let's get into the numbers. The lineups last season with all 4 of those guys outscored opponents by 9.2 points per 100 possessions. They played 1,672 possessions together. I mean, 90% of those were with Jay Crowder. Very few with Cam Johnson. There was some Torrey Craig. There was some Jalen Smith. But they destroyed. No matter who was that 5th guy. It was actually better with Cam, if that makes you feel any better about this season. It's not just a Jay thing. The chemistry, the role execution are unparalleled. I don't think, maybe you would have to say Golden State, especially with how those other couple of guys came out in the finals, especially in the playoffs last year between Looney and Wiggins. But the chemistry that the Suns have, the way that everybody just slips and sits perfectly in their role, you can't beat it. The Suns are elite when it comes to that. And then the continuity is it's an offshoot of that, but it also matters here. Year 3 of this core playing together, and year 4, if you take Chris Paul out, that's a huge advantage, okay? It allows them to start the season. It allows them to start, this next year of NBA basketball from a starting point that is way further along than most teams are right now, and build from that, right? There's going to be teams, I'm going to list off 3 others that I think are comparable, but a lot of them have injury concerns, or they have age concerns, or they have, whatever it might be. A guy that maybe you don't know who the 4th guy is in the group, right? And the Suns have those 4, and, Chris Paul being an age and an injury concern. I understand that, but there's so few question marks about this group. So those other 3, to list them off, the Warriors, I think you have to mention. In the West, I'm saying others in the West, because look, getting back to the finals is going to be a plenty tall order for this team. I don't want to pile any more onto it. So in the West, Curry, Clay, Wiggins, Green in Golden State. I think you need to see what Clay looks like. I think he was good enough for them to get through a pretty weak Western Conference last season and beat the Celtics with some big moments. But in order for them to be at the very, very top of the league and be a favorite again, you want all 4 of those guys at the peak of their powers. Clay's the question mark there. You don't know what you're getting from Draymond. And Wiggins, I mean, if what he was in the finals is what he's going to be going forward, then okay. But the second half of last regular season, he was hit or miss. But that one has to be there. The one that might be the best of all is in Denver. Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. In terms of sheer talent, you might not have a better foursome in the entire NBA. But obviously Murray's coming back from injury. Porter's coming back from injury and is still young and inconsistent. You don't know, what those guys all look like together. We saw it for, a month when the Gordon trade first happened, pre-COVID, if that shows you how long ago that was. And so we have to see it. And then last but not least, the Clippers. And it might surprise you, right? Because we think of that as sort of this two-headed snake, but what else? But if you actually think about it, they have a foursome that's played together for a while and that I think is more than deserving to be on this list. Kawhi, PG, obviously. But then if you add Reggie Jackson and Marcus Morris, that group has been together for quite a long time. 2 years, basically. They had a whole year together before Kawhi got hurt, and then last season, the other 3 without Kawhi kept that going, and this will be year 3 for that group, and year 4 if you include Marcus Morris, but not Reggie Jackson. So the Suns are up there. It's not as if they don't have any comparisons in the league, and that they're just going to be far and away the best. But again, that depth is the star depth. They have 4 top 50 players. So they can't always compete with the individual greatness of Luka or Giannis or Jokic or Kawhi or Curry, all players who I've named already in this show. But let's not get it twisted. They're not some sort of depth team like the 2010s Spurs, the 2014, 2015 Spurs. This is not, Manu's last legs, Tim's last legs, the pre-stardom Kawhi, and then, an all-star, all-NBA, MVP caliber Tony Parker, right? That's not what this team is. They have, again, 4 top 50 players who have incredible cohesion and fit together beautifully. And there's it's not just hyperbole. It's not just, we all really like how it looks when the Suns are hitting on all cylinders. There's backup to it. They were one of the best clutch teams in the history of the NBA last year. When they got into the last 5 minutes of close games, they just completely blew the team out the rest of the way, won almost every single opportunity they got in those spots. So we can worry about the bench. We can worry about top-end star power like Luka, like Giannis, who the Suns have run into lately. But do not forget this top 4 with 4 top 50 players, an incredible net rating last season. That is the reason the Suns are special. That is the foundation that makes this Suns team special. Some Robert Sarver news came out. I will quickly review it. The bank has been hired to make this sale, and that tells us a little bit. So we'll get to that. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by PrizePicks, and they are reinventing fantasy, okay? Tonight, Well, let's skip tonight. Preseason can be hard. Let's zoom all the way to opening night. I'm going to go Cam Johnson. I can't set my lineup yet. Trust me, I would have if I could. Cam Johnson over on threes. I don't think that the league will be, that PrizePicks, with all due respect, the rest of the NBA will be ready for the amount of threes that Cam Johnson is about to take as a starter. So I will go over on makes for him for sure. I will go over on Deandre Ayton points because I think he will be a big-time, potentially 20-point per game scorer this year. And then I'm going to go over on points for Luka as well because who the heck else is taking shots on that team? That is my lineup over at PrizePicks. You just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection. So you can do that on points, or you can do it on specific stats. You can also do it on fantasy points. So if you're a big fantasy football person, or if you love fantasy basketball, you could do over-unders on fantasy points is another way that PrizePicks allows you to do it. And you're mixing and matching. So you can go points for one person, fantasy points for somebody else, rebounds for another guy, and that can be it. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy, and they offer safe and fast withdrawals. PrizePicks currently operational in over 30 states in the United States and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app, guys, or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play their daily fantasy sports game. And that's not all. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100 from your bank, PrizePicks will take $100 from their bank and match it. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks gives you $50. Do not forget to enter the promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for an instant deposit match up to $100. All right, so Robert Sarver update. I will go quickly. I'm done with the nastiness. I'm done with litigating all of it. I know you guys are too. But from a basketball team standpoint, which I know you do care about if you're listening at home, of what comes next for the team you care about, that's what I'm here to give you some updates on. So the investment firm Moelis, I don't know how to say it, and company. I'm sorry, I'm not well versed in investment firm pronunciations. I hope you'll bear with me. Have been hired to facilitate the sale of both the Suns and the Mercury. Okay, so what is this bank? I have no idea. I don't know what they do, but I know 2 things about them, having read up on this a little bit, and from being a Chelsea fan over in the English Premier League. You probably heard about that sale. Safe to call it pretty extreme circumstances that we saw play out for Chelsea. Roman Abramovich, who was the owner of the team, was a Russian oligarch who had some close ties with Vladimir Putin. Putin invades Ukraine. Abramovich steps away, announces his intention to sell the team, hires this same bank. Okay, so one, the extremity of the situation I think is relevant because the Suns, they're not under pressure from a geopolitical conflict, but the bottom line is I think there is some obvious momentum behind this thing getting taken care of and getting taken care of in a savory way, right? That was a big through line with the Chelsea sale, is that as they moved away from Roman Abramovich and all of the fallout that was going on with the invasion and he wasn't involved, he's not a military leader, but, being friendly with Putin, Chelsea wanted to find a new owner that was going to be palatable, right? And I think that is similar here too, right? The vetting process, the community meetings, I could very much see that whoever starts to separate themselves from the pack might, maybe it's a meeting with the mayor of Phoenix, maybe it's meetings with Adam Silver. You never know. I think that situation will have parallels. And then this company, this bank, also has experience recently with the Atlanta Hawks. And that one is a little interesting to me because the price was just so much lower than we originally anticipated. It was less than $1 billion, which feels crazy now. That team, the Hawks, had a small portion of it invested in last year, which revalued the team over at almost $2 billion. So maybe that means somebody's getting a discount here. But either way, The NBA experience is good, as is, if you remember, Atlanta. That situation also had some extreme circumstances. That was also a team who ended up being sold in the aftermath of some bigoted comments from the owner. So some similarities here with Chelsea, with the Hawks, and just a big name bank. So that's that. Where does this go next? It's the question we've all been asking for a while. A few things. Within ESPN's report about this bank being hired, Baxter Holmes also wrote that apparently Chief Financial Officer Jim Pittman, who's also the general manager of the Mercury, sent an email or something out to the staff of the team saying that this could take 6 to 9 months to play out. Not unexpected. These things take a while. The Chelsea sale took 4 months or so. A little bit more extreme, again, because of the nature of the former owner with the Russian ties. And also the soccer season was in complete full swing. So this one will be too, but it's a little bit different because there's an interim governor. There's other owners who play a role in Phoenix who can step in, who have already stepped in. In that situation with Chelsea, they needed a new decision maker right before the transfer period and everything else that was going to need to happen. So I think that 6 to 9 month timeline feels realistic for this entire thing to be completed. But if you expect 6 months, like let's say it's 6 months but that's completed, right? That means along the lines of what's next, my guess is that we will start to hear some real names of suitors, so to speak, pretty soon. Now that there's an actual bank brokering the deal, and Sarver has obviously, stuck with his announcement that he wanted to sell the team, I think people will be chomping at the bit to be involved here. And that's what happened with Chelsea. That's what happens typically. Some NBA sales recently have happened very suddenly behind the scenes. So it has felt like there wasn't a bidding process, but in other situations, there very much has been. I think this will be the case, and I think we'll start to hear some names. Last but not least, Lindsey Smith, who worked for the Suns for a few years as a broadcaster and as an in-arena host, she was on PHNX, their show the other day, and said that she had heard Sarver's intention is to sell the full team. So not just his own stake or himself and some of his confidants and colleagues, the guys he's close with, like Sam Garvin, who's the interim governor, but the whole thing. So one, I'm not sure. It sounds like he's potentially allowed to do that, but I would imagine that there would have to be some level of signing off that would need to happen by those people in order for their shares to be sold. I don't think Sarver can require or force people to sell an investment that they've made. I'm not too sure, but if his intent, I've said that from the jump, that the NBA, setting aside whatever Sarver plans to do, the NBA will want to have full ownership be transferred. Because if you look around the league, the Hawks actually were one, as was Chelsea, where there were multiple investors going in together on a bid. Maybe that's how this goes, but even then I would imagine it will be a pretty limited number. It will not be like what the Suns have now, where it's, a dozen names all floating around who all own fairly sizable chunks of the team. I think if you look at Steve Ballmer, if you look at Tillman Fertitta, if you look at Ryan Smith, even from the Jazz, all of these people, I think that's his name, all of these people own more than half, at least more than half. And even the Hawks guy actually falls into that category. Joe Tsai owns the full thing. Ballmer owns the full thing. Fertitta owns the full thing 100%. So I think that's where this is headed. So it doesn't surprise me to hear Lindsey say that. I just think we need to see, is John the Joffrey willing to sell? Is Dial Home Court Partners, this venture capital company that invested a little bit in the Suns during COVID, is that firm willing to sell the stake that it had just purchased? These are the questions. Larry Fitzgerald even. I know he's a Sarver guy, but he just bought like 3 years ago. So will he want to keep that investment, or will he sell? That's kind of where I think this will go. Who wants to buy? Who is willing to sell? And how does that all look? And that should start to come soon. So do not be surprised to hear that. To close out the show, I want to give you one more role player capsule, which will be Dwayne Washington, the player that I've said that about a lot of guys, that I'm most excited about them. I'm pretty darn excited about Dwayne Washington. I'll tell you why next. First, I'm very excited as well, just like I am about Dwayne Washington, to tell you guys about My Solar Nerd. If you live in a sunny state like Arizona, it's very likely you've had a few people, more than a few, stop by offering you what they call free solar. The truth is, as you might have learned, unfortunately, along the way, many of these companies aren't local. They don't know what the deal is locally. And because of that, they're using misleading tactics to overcharge you, to lie to you, in short. If you've considered solar but something felt just a little bit off, you're going to love My Solar Nerd. Their mission is simple: help you get the best solar system to fit your needs. The guys at MySolarNerd.com, once again, are local. They live here, they work here, and they understand the nuances of going solar here. They've been doing it for a while, and they understand that an educated customer is a happy customer, and their no-pressure approach will make sure all your questions get answered. Once you're ready, they'll put their industry knowledge to work for you by choosing the best equipment, warranties, and installers. They'll also help you figure out all the credits and incentives that you may qualify for and make sure your transition to solar is as smooth as possible by managing the entire project for you and keeping you updated along the way. Our listeners, Locked On listeners, will get a $50 Amazon gift card when they book a no-commitment evaluation. This promotion is only for Locked On listeners, once again, and only for homeowners. You can't put solar panels on your apartment complex, unfortunately. Visit MySolarNerd.com and select Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us section. Once again, make the switch to solar on your terms. Start your research process by visiting MySolarNerd.com today and show Locked On some love by letting them know we sent you. Folks, going solar doesn't need to be complicated, and MySolarNerd.com makes it easy. Duane Washington Jr., two-way player, Ohio State, Indiana Pacers, now to the Phoenix Suns. So who is he? We haven't gotten to see him much. Hasn't been much talked about in training camp. Didn't get in preseason game number 1. We'll see about preseason game number 2 tonight. I'm not too sure. But you got to start with the shooting. Shot 38% from deep and 81%. I did addition and division to get you these numbers. 38% from deep and 81% from the free throw line if you combine his last 2 years at Ohio State and his first year in the NBA. Those numbers, guys, are good. All right? He's a legit shooter. And also watching him warm up in before the first preseason game, he's one of those guys where you can just see it. Like, you all know, if you've ever watched basketball live, it doesn't have to be NBA games. Great shooters, it's different, okay? I don't think he's not Klay Thompson, but there's a very noticeable difference between the guys who can make some shots and the guys who are shooters, all right? Duane Washington is a shooter. He also has legit size, 6'3", and he's a real 6'3", broad-shouldered, 6'8" wingspan, so he's not one of these, by his statistical profile, you might look at it and be like, all right, he's Lou Williams or, whatever you want to compare him to, but he's not small like that. He's a prototypical scoring point guard size. Gilbert Arenas or these guys, right? Like, maybe he's not as big as Gilbert Arenas, but you get me, right? 6'3", 6'8" wingspan, strong, good build. He's not a perfect player, all right? What can he not do? So he only shot 50% at the rim last season. He got to the rim, took decent amount of shots at the rim, but he only made half of them. Not great for, a scorer of a 6'3" scorer should shoot better than 50% at the rim. He was in the bottom quarter of the NBA by being so inefficient there. He's never flashed. I mean, look, I didn't watch his Ohio State tape. I'm not coming to you as the number one scout of Duane Washington in the United States of America, but you just look at the numbers, you look at the articles that have been written about him, etc. Not a guy who's flashed as a huge difference maker on defense. Now, I think because of his size and the wingspan, maybe he can. I don't think it's hopeless. I think if you just say, hey, guard ones and twos, do your job, rotate, learn our system, play some smart defense and use your body, maybe get in passing lanes a little more. Like, you could see it, but it's never really happened up to this point. And then last but not least, he's not a great assist to turnover guy. Like, assists is one thing for a passer, a playmaker. It's good to average a lot. He hasn't really done that. But even worse than that is he's turned the ball over a little bit too. So it's like when he's passing, when he's making plays for his teammates, not a lot of them are turning into buckets and quite a few of them are turning into turnovers. That's not what you want. But as a scorer, if that's what you're asking him to do, is to take and make shots everywhere, I think he's pretty darn good at that, and I think he really could break out. And fortunately for the Suns, or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, that's also what they basically ask their current point guard to do, which brings us to the future. And this is kind of how I've been doing these role player capsules between a Kogi I did last week, now Jock Landale on Tuesday's show, and here we are Wednesday with Dwayne Washington, is like, okay, what are they? What aren't they? And then what are they going to be? And what does that mean? So that brings us to the future. I think, genuinely, Dwayne Washington deserves a look this year as the Suns' backup point guard. I have not been inspired since the Clippers series in the Western Conference Finals was probably the last time I was really excited about what Cam Payne was doing for this team. It's not me being dismissive or rude to the guy. I just haven't. There's not a lot of reason to be super psyched about it. And if that continues, if Landry Shamet's disappointment continues, Dwayne Washington is sitting right there, and he's proven he can do a lot of the things that this team would need for him to do. So I think he should get that shot. He's on a two-way contract, which means you do have to limit it a little bit, but as things currently stand, assuming the Suns don't take Timothy Luwawu-Cabarrot or Frank Jackson or who's the last guy onto their actual NBA roster, they'll have an open roster spot. They have only 14 guaranteed full contracts right now, and you could see Dwayne Washington taking one of those. Jock Landale is also non-guaranteed. They could cut him. I sort of don't expect that to happen. We could see trades with Jay Crowder that potentially include two players. You could see them trading Jay Crowder and Torrey Craig. That would create a roster spot. Jay Crowder and Dario Saric. That could create a roster spot. So you would have opportunities to elevate Dwayne Washington from a two-way contract where he can only play a limited amount of games before his time is up, and as we saw with Ish Wainwright last year, he would not be eligible for the playoffs if he was on that two-way deal, or you can elevate him, right? Same thing will go with Ish, because Ish is on he's on a two-way contract once again. So there will be some roster spot juggling going on. I think Dwayne Washington deserves a look before they have to make those decisions late in the season. So I expect that he will get some run. I think he'll see the floor in preseason. Maybe it's the final preseason game. I would think the Suns will rest players at that point. We'll see. But the talent is undeniable. If he gets going off of that two-way contract, he becomes a restricted free agent, so the Suns have the ability to re-sign him well. He's getting older, too, so I don't know. I don't know what his priorities will be to catch on in the league in some way. But he's about to be 23 this upcoming season, so it's not like he's 19. I think he'll be what he's going to be, so you just need to see it. And I think the Suns will show a level of commitment to him to at least give him some time. And I'm excited to see it. Closing out the week, guys, recap of the preseason Lakers game tonight, Wednesday, and some news and everything else to close out the week Thursday. I probably have one more role player capsule on Damian Lee to get to. So do not go anywhere. Hit follow, hit subscribe if you're new to the show. I appreciate you guys all making Locked On Suns your first listen today. Now, go make Locked On NBA your second listen to catch up on everything else going on around the league.